All right, good morning, everybody. Tom Trento here in the studios in South Florida, United West Studios. Day 8. This is day 8. Last Monday, we had our gold team meeting, we call it, a group of about 20, 25 leaders who work together to educate people on the importance of electing Donald Trump as president, particularly in the state of Florida. And we were very successful in Florida. Trump won by a huge margin. And unfortunately, that didn't happen all over the country. We know the problems that are still being investigated with the election, the integrity of the election. But we kept our team together, and we decided to confront the enemies within and without, the Marxist movement, Black Lives, Antifa, all of that, and to be a counter to the Biden administration's not even liberal, not even leftist, beyond progressive Marxist doctrines that are being proposed throughout the United States, particularly out of Washington, D.C. So we have our group for that. We had a meeting last Monday. I'm giving you a little context for why we're covering the war in Israel day and night, day and night. At the meeting there, Dr. Ronnie Wexler told us that the situation is developing very rapidly in Israel, and most likely there's going to be a war. So immediately we went on the air Monday afternoon, the first organization in the United States to do that. And we've been here every day. This is day 8. We will be here until the end. The end will probably be some sort of ceasefire, probably this week. World pressure is mounting on Israel. So our desire is to provide factual information, not fake news, real news, through experts who come on our show and through our contacts in Israel. And you've seen many of them over the past 8 days. Special show today. We have friends of ours who have expertise in a variety of areas. Yesterday, we looked at the link between Christians supporting Israel on a Sunday that was dedicated for that. Today, we'll continue with a bit of that, but we're going to dive down into other elements of this particular war. We have 3 outstanding guests. We have General Jerry Boykin, who will be on momentarily. Then Erick Stakelbeck, who works for Christian Broadcasting Network, produces phenomenal programming called The Watchman. He'll be on in a little bit, and he's back and forth regularly to Israel. So we'll get an understanding of what's going on in the ground in Israel. And then a bit later, we have, in this hour, we have David Horowitz, good friend of the show, David Horowitz Freedom Center. David was a Marxist, a red diaper baby, grew up in a Marxist family, adopted a Marxist philosophy until I think he fell down, hit his head, and woke up and became a hardcore anti-Marxist for the past 50 years, has written extensively, has a new book, The Enemies Within the United States Government. So he'll be on speaking about that. But let's start our show with our dear friend, General Jerry Boykin. General Boykin, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much, Tom. It's good to be with you.
Usually, this is called the Trento Gold Show. Usually, my co-host, the empty area over here, is Susie Gold, an Orthodox Jewish woman, Torah observant. And today is the beginning of a very significant Jewish holiday, Jewish time of reflection, Shavuot, 7 weeks of 7 days, 49 days after Pentecost. And it marks the ascent of Moses after the Red Sea was crossed, the wandering. They go to Mount Sinai. Moses, can you call him Michael? He's calling me for some reason. Moses goes up to Mount Sinai to spend time with the Lord, comes down with 2 stone tablets, the 10 Commandments. Actually, Moses was given 613 laws. The 10 Commandments are a preamble. Each of the commandments, if elucidated and detailed, will include the 613 laws contained in the Pentateuch, the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Jews worldwide are recognizing a time of reflection, a time of the first harvest. It's a time of celebration and recognition of the law being given on Mount Sinai. You familiar with any of that, General Boykin?
Yes, I am indeed, simply because I grew up in a home that believed that the Jews were God's chosen people and that we had to do all we could to support them and to understand them.
And look, this battle's been going on for 4,000 years, from the beginning of the Hebrew history in Israelis, Jews from Judea. The enemies surrounding them have always attacked them because of what you just said. God's chosen people, not chosen because they're special. They were chosen to bring the light of monotheism to the world, and that light blinds a lot of people. They don't like it, and you see it happening right now. So you have had a significant career serving our country in the U.S. military, winding up as a general in the United States Army, involved in formulating Delta Force, one of the elite commando units. But you're also a pastor. You're a hardcore evangelical. You've written Never Surrender, great book. When's your next book coming out? It's been a few years. When's the next one coming out?
No, I had one that came out last April called Man to Man. I'm trying to fight back against this whole idea of toxic masculinity and the emasculation of our men in this country. So Man to Man is my latest book, but I'm working on two other books right now. And one of them is going to be about Joshua, who is my favorite character in the Bible. And he was a man, and he is, I think he's a good example for men in America today. So that's my next project, and we'll turn that manuscript in July.
Now, give us a little insight. We're looking forward to that. Give us a little insight into Family Research Council, and then we're going to get into some of the war fighting in Israel right now.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tom. We learned a lot during this COVID shutdown and all. We've never shut down. We kept Family Research Council open, and we took the precautions and all, but we've never shut down, and we've continued doing men's conferences and pastor roundtables and really fighting against religious persecution, particularly persecution of Christians. That's a big deal for us.
You're based in Washington, D.C., so you're in the middle of the pit there.
Well, Tom, let me just say that for those of your viewers that have not been to Washington lately, don't be confused when you go up there, because we're living through a big con. And members of the Congress, particularly Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, are running a big con on America. They've got National Guard troops out on the streets there with no weapons. So what are they doing? Directing traffic. And they have concertina wire around not only the Capitol, but the White House. And this is all for optics, all for optics. There's no threat to substantiate this, to back this up. It's all optics. So if you come to Washington, you see all this, just keep in mind, it's a con game that's being played against you.
Well, on January 6th, the so-called insurrection, and we're doing a short documentary on the absurdity of using the term insurrection for what occurred on January 6th. We had about 15 of our friends from the United West there, including my daughter who went. And there were and Susie Gold, my co-host, was there. There were between 1 and 1.5 million people. And it was a phenomenal event. We were live streaming back here from them. A couple of hundred people went above and beyond and crazy and broke the law and all of this. And of those couple of hundred, probably 100 or so will be convicted of some crime. Most are going to be released for trespassing, some some nonsensical misdemeanor. But the world, at least the US government in control of Democrats, has changed dramatically, viewing the activities of a handful of very bad people and saying these are the Trump supporters, to the degree. What goes through your head and your heart and your blood when you hear Trump supporters, you and I and others, being now the primary homeland designated group to be fearful of from a terrorism point of view?
What goes through my head is that I never thought I'd live to see this. I never thought I'd live to see in this nation that people that love the Constitution, the flag, the national anthem, that love the freedoms that our founding fathers gave us, would actually be considered to be terrorists in the land. But what you need to consider is what that really shows is just how far to the left, just how far towards Marxism and communism the rest of the country has gone, at least the leadership of the Democratic Party, just how far they've gone to the left, that they would openly criticize us as being domestic terrorists. I'm not a domestic terrorist. I love this country. I made an investment in this country of 36 plus years of my life in this country. And I'm not a terrorist, but I know that if they get the opportunity, they're going to tag me as a terrorist simply because I do love this nation. I love this Constitution and all that goes with it.
Well, when you finished your illustrious career serving in the United States Navy, right? You're in the Navy?
Yeah, that's real funny.
Oh, that was Mark. I'm sorry. I confused you with Mark for a minute.
Yeah,
Mark,
that's funny too.
Mark did 4 tough years. Half of the time, is it the brig in the Navy, or where do you wind up? Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you finished your military career in the United States Army, you served in various intelligence levels in the administration. But none of that matters to the media, the legacy media, particularly the Huffington Post, Mark. I was just reading the other day, and my buddy Jerry Boykin pops up in the Huffington Post as an out-of-control former general who was involved in writing a letter articulating the concern of 120 other military leaders. We're going to put that up here in a second. What was this letter all about, and has the intensity against you stopped in the past few days?
No, the answer to that is no. And but you know, what's the old saying? You don't take flack until you're over the target. Well, I think I'm probably over their target right now. And listen, in September, before the election, we wrote a letter saying this is the most critical election in American history. And this is going to decide whether we're going to be a constitutional republic or we're going to be a Marxist nation. And so we did that in September. And now the things that we said were going to happen in America, that we were very concerned about, are now happening. They're happening. The rule of law has basically been ignored altogether. We've got an out of control president that has canceled the pipeline, and now basically what we're seeing is that we're suffering as a result of that. I mean, I live in Washington most of the time, and I will tell you, I can't find a gas station there with gas. We have a border crisis. We have an economic crisis. We have a president that can't remember the name of his Secretary of Defense. And we just went down the line and talked about voter integrity and how critical that is to the nation. Well, the left came unglued, particularly because we questioned the stability of the president. Now, keep this in mind. For 1 year of campaigning and 4 years as in the administration, the left hit Donald Trump every single day about his mental stability, about his fitness for office. And now we have asked them to do the same for the current president, and they have come unglued. So that's why I'm an out of control general, retired general, according to them.
According to the Huffington Post and everyone else.
Yeah.
Well, in Israel, the war is ongoing, and today, Monday, it's 4:16 local time in Israel right now, 9:16 a.m. Tom Trento hosting No Susie Gold today, folks. My Torah observant Jewish woman co-host, wonderful, great friend of ours, does a great job. She's celebrating Shavuot for the next 2 days. She'll be back Wednesday. Thursday, by the way, we'll have Pat Boone on, who wrote the words to Exodus, strong supporter of Israel. But today, the Israeli IDF killed a senior Palestinian Islamic Jihad commander. Now, for the folks out there, we're going to bring an expert on in a few seconds here, good friend of ours. For the folks tuning in to get essential information from us, there are essentially three political entities, Islamic entities in Israel, confronting the Israelis. Over in Judea, Samaria, known as, to many as the West Bank of the Jordan River, we have the Palestinian Authority, led by Mahmoud Abbas, who is in his, I think it's 17th year of a 4-year term as president, recently canceled the elections. Over in Gaza, 21 miles long, 3 miles wide at its longest point, the official government of those 1.5 million people is the Hamas, a designated terrorist organization. And fighting with them, but now joining with them, is Islamic Palestinian Jihad, Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They're there, and everyone is gearing up against the Israelis. Let's go to a dear friend of ours, Erick Stakelbeck. Erick, how are you today, Erick?
Tom, I'm great. It's great to be with you. It's great to be with General Boykin. It's been a while, General. Always an honor to be with you. And hey, the Middle East never sleeps. I'm not getting much sleep right now following everything that's going on, but hey, we do what we do for such a time as this.
Erick, you have been with Christian Broadcasting Network for a long time. You're producing a phenomenal show, The Watchmen. All of us are big fans of that.
Thank you.
A lot of my friends ask, does Erick live in Israel? I mean, where does the guy live? Where do you live, and how often are you in Israel?
You know what? It's funny, Tom. I lived not far from General Boykin for about 17 years. I lived outside the swamp in D.C. I moved back home last summer. I'm from Philadelphia originally. My wife and I live outside of Philly now. But I'm in Israel usually 5 to 6 times a year. COVID obviously affected that, but I plan to get back actually very soon, God willing. So it seems like I'm in Israel every day, but when we're there, Tom, and you've done this too, you work hard when you're there filming for about 8 days. You get a bunch of shows in the can, you come back home, then you go back a few months later and you start it all over again. That's how we do it. Actually, the show is on TBN, the Trinity Broadcasting Network, but had a great run at CBN as well.
Absolutely. And General Boykin, what do you think of this guy, Steckelbeck?
Yeah, well, he's from Philadelphia, so. But, listen, Erick, I think that you have been such a important voice today. I think the fact that you know what you are talking about, and you're not afraid to be bold in telling people what's really going on a number of fronts. That's refreshing. And I think that you are called, as you said, you are called to do what you're doing at such a time as this.
Thank you so much, General. And right back at you. I feel that way about you as well. Thank you so much. That means a lot.
What's very interesting, folks, 9:20 in the morning, Tom Trento here in the studios in Palm Beach, Florida. A little different than Philadelphia. But the cheesesteak sandwiches, either Pat's or Gino's, they're fabulous. I'm a Jersey boy, grew up in Newark, New Jersey. And so
I'm actually in New York City today at TBN's New York studios. So you
Beautiful.
thought Philly was bad. Now I'm in New York City.
Yeah, now you're there. You're a glutton for punishment.
Yes.
But Eric, you're working day and night. Give us a 2-minute synopsis of what's going on in Israel right now.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, Tom, an important point we need to make is this is first and foremost the Iranian regime behind the scenes. Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad are Iranian proxies. They are bought and paid for, armed, funded, supported by the head of the snake in Tehran. What I think we're seeing right now, Tom, and I hate to use this term, is a dry run of sorts, in that Iran right now has surrounded Israel with what I call a ring of fire on all sides. You have Hamas and Islamic Jihad in the southwest. To the deep south, you have the Houthis in Yemen. To the north, of course, Iran's most lethal proxy, Hezbollah, armed to the teeth, some 150,000 rockets and missiles pointed at every inch of Israel. Then to the east, you have these Iraqi Shia militias, also with missiles that can reach Israel. And lastly, of course, to the northeast, you have Syria, where Iran and Hezbollah are determined to establish a foothold. So I call it the ring of fire. And I believe that Iran right now is using this Hamas Islamic Jihad onslaught against Israel as a test run, in that they're saying, okay, how much damage can we cause? Number one, with these rockets and attack drones that we have equipped our proxies with. Secondly, and perhaps even more importantly, guys, how does Israel respond? The Israeli political class, the Israeli civilian population, the Israeli military. How does the United States respond? Another key question. And the so-called international community, how will the Biden White House respond? So a dress rehearsal, I believe, for a later date, Tom, when Iran will unleash Hezbollah. Now, in my view, they've been kind of keeping Hezbollah in reserve in this conflict and preserving Hezbollah to fight another day at a time of Iran's choosing. But right now they are observing. The mullahs in Tehran are sitting back. They're observing. They're watching everything that is going on and how this is all being conducted. Hey, the Israel Defense Forces said yesterday the barrage of rockets that we've seen has come at a greater volume than in any previous conflict. Think about this, Tom, in general. Last Wednesday, Hamas fired over 130 rockets in a 5-minute span, and they're reaching now not just southern Israel, which is bad enough, but steady bombardments of central Israel, including that Tel Aviv metro area. So unprecedented in many ways. But last thing real quick, Israel has been very effective in striking back. Tom, as you mentioned in the lead-in, a top Palestinian Islamic Jihad commander killed today. He was the commander of their northern Gaza operations. Israel has also taken out several top Hamas leaders, practically destroyed, or at least decimated this massive underground terror tunnel network that Hamas had going that stretched some 600 miles throughout Gaza. So very effective campaign for Israel as well. But now we have the world, of course, howling for a ceasefire. So we'll see where it goes.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot here. I don't want you to miss what Eric just said regarding this ring of fire. And as you're speaking, Eric, and General, we're Christians, the three of us, strong supporters of Israel. You're talking, and I'm going through pages in my head of the book of Revelation, but that's a story for another show.
And perhaps Ezekiel 38 and 39, the war of Gog and Magog. That's another show for sure. There's a lot going on prophetically.
Unbelievable. General, I believe it was Operation Eagle Claw. You were part of the commando unit to rescue the hostages in Iran back in 1980, 79. So you have been in Iran. And you've also, while you were in the service, you served time in Israel working with the Israeli military. If when we hang up, we can give Bibi a call, and I know Eric can. He can get the Bibi, give him a call and say, you got to talk to Boykin. And
probably not right now, though, unfortunately.
Yeah, not right now. They call you in and they say, General Boykin, sit down. Tell us, what should we do from here? What's your advice to the Israeli military?
Yeah, I did. I lived up in Akko with the Golani Brigade over there for a period of time, and I've spent a lot of time over there, and I really, um, I feel like I have a better appreciation and understanding of the life of a typical Israeli, but also of the life of their military. And this is all or nothing for them. So my advice to them would be, and they already know this, but you're not going to win the 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 publicity campaign. You're not going to win that. You're not going to win the propaganda campaign. You're going to be condemned no matter what you do. So why don't let's just go do it all. You don't. This is what Americans have trouble with: proportionality. If they fire 3 rockets in Israel out of the Gaza Strip, then the Israelis should fire 3 rockets back at them. But if you look at any kind of military strategy, if you get attacked, you destroy what attacked you. You destroy it, so you don't have to worry about it attacking you again. And I think that the Israelis need to go all out now. I am very concerned about the innocent children in both Israel as well as these Palestinian areas that are going to be casualties of this, and that grieves me. But that said, the Israelis are left with no choice. They need to destroy these entities that are firing these rockets and missiles at them, and they need to not worry about the public relations game. They need to go all out and do what they have to do right now. And Joe Biden, if he does not get in this game and support Israel and say how quickly can you receive more Iron Dome warheads to knock down these rockets? We'll get them to you just as quickly as you're ready to take them. And what else do you need? What other materiel do you need? What other support do you need? And we ought to be at the United Nations right now, standing with Israel and condemning this attack on Israel. We ought to be using our diplomatic power, which is eroding very rapidly. And we ought to be standing with Israel and encouraging the Israelis, the people of Israel, as well as the military, that America's got your back. And I don't see that happening.
No. Sadly, with this administration, Chuck Schumer, the head of the United States Senate, and a strong Israel supporter on some levels for many years, is being pressured like crazy. A letter was put together by the U.S. Congress. He did not sign it, calling for a ceasefire, all of that. So we got to keep our eyes on what's going on with Schumer in the next few days. But this is not the Trump administration or the individual leaders, David Friedman, Ambassador David Friedman. Eric, you know, we were invited guests, Janine Pirro, myself, by the White House to the moving of the embassy, May 14th, 2018, with Ronnie Wexler, Dr. Ronnie Wexler. Before we came on the air, I talked to him. He's celebrating Shavuot, otherwise he would have been in the studio. He said, make sure you deal with the issue of the fake social media information that is being used on both sides to fuel nonsensical issues and exacerbate the situation. Eric, speak to the social media component, particularly in Israel, and speak to the Arab Israelis who have been living side by side with Jews for many years peacefully. Now they're burning Akko and Jaffa. What's going on, Eric?
Yeah, number one, Tom, to the social media. I can speak from personal experience over the past week. I have been attacked on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram by legions of trolls, pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel trolls. Many of them are Palestinian or Muslim from the Middle East, but many are leftists as well, who I assume live here in the States. And it's never a coherent argument refuting the facts that I'm giving. It's always profanity-laced tirades, and Israel is a terrorist, and you're a dog for supporting Israel. So that's what's going on social media right now. And in terms of the false content on social media, real fake news, General Boykin hit on it. The civilian casualty factor is what everyone's hitting on. Something to keep in mind, gentlemen, 2 things. Number one, as we know, Hamas and Islamic Jihad willfully use men, women, children, the elderly, civilians as human shields. People are asking, how are these rockets still falling after Israel has hit them so hard? Well, Hamas intentionally stations these missile launchers, rocket launchers, in densely populated civilian areas where Israel will not strike, or they try to avoid striking because there are civilians there, and Israel goes to extraordinary lengths to avoid civilian casualties. That's number one. Number two, hundreds of these Hamas and Islamic Jihad rockets have not reached their intended target in Israel. They have fallen short and landed in Gaza. In the process, Hamas's own rockets have killed several Palestinian civilians. So that's some of the truth bombs, no pun intended, that we've been trying to drop on people on social media. And the backlash has been, the vitriol has, I can't say I'm surprised, gentlemen, we've seen this before, but we are in a spiritual battle is what it brings home to me for sure. In terms of the internal unrest in Israel, Israeli officials are very, very alarmed by this, and rightfully so. It was simmering under the surface, it looks like, for some time. I've been in all of these cities. General, you were stationed in Akko, Haifa, Jaffa, Lod, all these cities, Jerusalem, of course, that have been racked by this unrest over the past week. And I've always felt comfortable there, you know, always moved around freely, gone to restaurants, talked to Jews and Arabs in those cities. But this is really blown up, and Hamas, the Palestinian leadership, to me, bears sole responsibility for this in many ways. Hamas, number one, stirring things up. But number two, he's been awful quiet the past few days. But let's not forget about Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestinian Authority, Israel's so-called partner for peace, who's been cheering on what he calls the martyrs in this engagement right now. He really got this ball rolling about a week and a half ago when, number one, he canceled Palestinian elections. But secondly, and more important, he stirred Palestinian rioters up on the Temple Mount and in Jerusalem to start attacking Israeli police. And then it escalated from there with Hamas launching rockets. But two things. Number one, Abbas is certainly has blood on his hands, I would say. And secondly, hey, all roads lead to Jerusalem. As always, this all started in Jerusalem about a week and a half ago. And one day it will all end in Jerusalem.
Oh, that's another show. Yeah, General, go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's also something that we need to make clear, and Eric can talk about this, but this whole idea of negotiating peace, even a ceasefire, people have to understand that there is not one faction, one entity there that can speak for the, quote, Palestinians. There's not one, because when we get into talks, peace talks or negotiations on a ceasefire, we're normally talking to Mahmoud Abbas and Fatah. And at the same time, in the Gaza Strip, Hamas is firing rockets over into Israel to disrupt those peace talks. So people need to understand and consider that. So you got to cut two different deals, because nobody speaks for all the Palestinians over there. And by the way, they are at odds with each other most of the time.
You know, it's really unbelievable. At 9:34 in the morning, Tom Trento, your host here on the Trento Gold Show. No Susie Gold today. She's home, observant Jewish woman, celebrating and recognizing, commemorating Shavuot, the 49 days, 7 weeks of 7 after Pentecost, when Moses crossed the Red Sea, went up to Mount Sinai, and was given the law, the Pentateuch, the Torah, the first 5 books, came down with the preamble, the 2 stones with 10 commandments, and he also came down with a total of 613 laws that Torah observant Jews tried to follow, those that can be followed without the temple being in existence. So my co-host is not here, but we have 2 very good friends of Israel, General Jerry Boykin and Erick Stakelbeck. so much going on, but we just were joined with another dear friend of ours, Jewish fellow, who, as I mentioned at the outset of the show, was a red diaper baby, raised in a Marxist home, bought into Marxism. Then as a young adult said, this is crazy. This is completely crazy. Became a hardcore conservative, has been arguing for many, many years, the Judeo-Christian worldview, has written extensively, has a new book. We'll put that up, Mark. The Enemies Within, How a Totalitarian Movement is Destroying America. Please, General Boykin and Eric, welcome our dear friend David Horowitz to the show.
I know, Eric.
Yes.
General. I think you'll enjoy this book.
Yeah, David, great to see you as always. And congrats on the new book, much needed.
Yeah, thank you, David, for what you're doing.
I think in the realm of political warfare, which the Democrats have declared on not only on Republicans, but on our country, words are the weapons, and our words are not yet up to the battle. The Democrats, Pelosi, what did she say? Republicans are enemies of the state. They're insurrectionists, traitors, in other words, white supremacists, racists. And what do Republicans call Democrats? Liberals. We can't win that war. And my book really is an attempt to explain why the Democrat Party is a totalitarian party. The proper term for them is communist or fascist. Not that there's a big difference between those two.
David, we've been talking about what's going on in Israel, and one of the elements is
Nazi caucus in the Democratic House. I'm crying out tears.
I know. I got a question for you, David.
I mean, what is Nazism? It's socialism and exterminate the Jews. That's where AOC and Ilhan Omar and Bernie Sanders are. It's terrible.
Well, that was my question to you. We have Abu Mazen stirring up the Arab street in Israel. We have Hamas doing that. Now we're seeing the Arab street in Bolivia. I mean, what the heck does Bolivia have to do? They got Palestinian, Free Palestine rallies in the streets of Bolivia, in Germany, in England.
Jew hatred is a universal disease. Yeah. I mean, Israel is really in battle. It's without America as its ally, and Biden has so weakened that relationship. Israel can't survive. And it's such a tragedy because Trump had just brokered these accords. Until the Abrahamic Accords, all the Arab countries wanted to see the end of Israel. And we had this tremendous breakthrough, and Biden and his communist friends have destroyed it. This country is in deep, deep trouble.
Well, two countries in deep trouble now. What's your view on the role of the so-called squad? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Hate America left. This is the subtitle is How a Totalitarian Movement is Destroying America. This was launched, I was part of this in the 60s. I was brought up by communists. And I left the left when I realized it wasn't about social justice or peace. It was a Hate America left. And that Hate America left, first, it created a riot at the Democrat convention in '68 to destroy Hubert Humphrey, who was the Democrat nominee for president. Humphrey was like a 95% so-called liberal socialist, but he was an anti-communist, and that was his sin. So they destroyed his chances of being president. Then they marched into the party behind in the campaign, McGovern campaign. McGovern's campaign theme was America Come Home, like we're the problem instead of the solution. And then they spent the next 50 years. I've written an awful lot of words about their steady takeover of the Democrat Party. They are now in control of the Democrat Party. It's an alien party. It's anti-American. It's racist to the core. And it's a criminal party.
We don't, David.
It's letting criminals out of jail.
David, we don't want you to mince any words for sure. You have two friends here, General Boykin and Erick Stakelbeck, hardcore Christian supporters of Israel. You have any questions? You have any questions for them, David? You have any questions for them?
Well, how's it going on the battlefield, gentlemen? That's what I want to know. I think that Trump has left a great gift. Well, he hasn't left it because he's thankfully, mercifully still there. But he created the first conservative mass movement in our history. When I came into the right 40 years ago, I looked around and the first thing I said is, where's the ground army? The left has hundreds, probably thousands of organizations attacking politicians, harassing them, extorting them, and CEOs of corporations, intimidating them until they get on their program. Jesse Jackson and Sharpton sort of pioneered this with their racial extortion movement. I was told this actually by Bob Beckel, who witnessed it. Jesse Jackson saying to a beer company, give us $10 million or we're gonna call you racist and boycott you. And that's how the left operates. And the conservatives are live and let live, which is fine. It's a civilized attitude, but not in war. War is kind of, excuse me, General, but it's a barbarian. There are no, your enemies don't follow any rules. So it's no holds barred. And Trump has left this mass movement. It's hundreds of thousands, millions of people. And you see it now in the effort. I wrote 5 books about the communist takeovers of the schools. They did okay, but the Republican Party did nothing, even though they controlled 33 state legislatures. So, I'm waiting for a sit-in at the headquarters of Twitter and Zuckerberg's palace, making their lives miserable until they stop censoring conservatives.
Interesting.
I'm waiting for the same thing at school boards, get in the faces of these teachers who are ideologues. We've had a year when these teachers, they refuse to go to work even though it's safe, and we're paying them. How can you have respect for these people? Get in their face when they try to teach kids that they're gender fluid or that America's a terrible place.
Gentlemen, I have to run for a 9:45 hit. Real quick, David, you make a great point about the schools. My wife and I are thanking God. Our girls were in public school. They're in a Christian school now. They were in school 5 days a week in person this year since August. And we know families whose kids have been ruined by this, by being home and Zooming for the past 15 months. Insanity. But David, good luck with the book. General, Tom, great to see you guys. God bless you. Keep up the great work. I'll see you again soon.
Thanks,
All right,
Eric.
God bless you, Eric.
Take care, gentlemen. Bye-bye.
Get you in Israel. General,
Yes, God willing.
David raised the question of mobilizing activists. We saw that happening on January 6th, 1.5 million people. Very peaceful, great. Some outliers caused problems. The evangelical community seems to be waking up to some extent. Speak to the evangelical community, taking to the street if necessary, lawfully, peacefully, but making our voices known. Is that going to happen? Is it possible? Is it right? Is it wrong? What's the situation with that?
I spoke to several thousand people this weekend down in right outside of Nashville in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, at a huge evangelical church down there. And I just said, America has to stand with Israel. And ladies and gentlemen, Israel will never be defeated. No matter what, Israel will never be defeated. But we as Christians need to stand with them. And I got to tell you, that it was they were on their feet. They were cheering. They are fired up about what they're seeing now that's happening in Israel. And so I say this, I ask this simple question to David. David, what do we have to do, or is there anything we can do to get the American Jews to change their attitude towards their allegiance to the Democratic Party or the liberal issues that they seem to be tied up with.
That's a tough task.
Yeah.
If this country had to depend on the Jews, it would be toast. It's the evangelical movement, the so-called religious right, that elected Ronald Reagan and elected Donald Trump and has saved this country so far. The problem here is that the left, what leftism is a crypto religion. Yeah, it's the, it copies the Judeo-Christian, or particularly the Christian narrative, that the world is a fallen place. It's corrupted by racists, patriarchs, corporations, you name it. And there's going to be a redemption, and we are the redeemers. There's nobody more dangerous than people who think that they can perform the work of a divinity and create a new world. You can't understand the Biden administration's incredibly stupid and destructive moves unless you understand that they have this vision of over the rainbow. There's this redeemed world where there's no racism, no sexism, no homophobia, no poverty, no war, where people are completely different than they've been for 5,000 years. That's the vision that allows them to do incredibly stupid and destructive things like pay people more money not to work than they would get to work. You can't explain it any other way. As you know, I've written a book, Dark Agenda.
I read it.
Good book, yep.
Or to destroy Christian America. America is a Christian country. I had a rabbi once who said, if Christians are good Christians, then Jews are safe. That was the bottom line. And America, because it was a Christian country, was the safest place. But they have been dismantling Christianity in public life, actually, since John F. Kennedy. If you remember, when Kennedy ran for president, he answered the attacks on his religion by saying, that's my private life. It's not private. Every freedom we hold dear, every value originated as a Christian idea. Without Protestant Christians, there would be no America, which is what my book is about. But they have been systematically driving it out of public life. So now the Democrat Party, these incredibly vindictive bigots like Pete Buttigieg, but all of them, to them, religious freedom, the First Amendment, that's the foundation of all of our freedoms, means this: you can believe anything you want, but keep it to yourself. Mm-hmm. If you say it in the public square, we're going to go after you. And the Obama administration was the most anti-Christian administration in our history, but now, the people around Biden are even worse. So this is really a religious battle. And
that's for sure.
about the Jews, there's a joke that says that Reform Judaism is the Democrat Party with holidays.
That's pretty good. I haven't heard that one yet.
Orthodox Jews, the Jews who actually read the Bible in Hebrew and read the Talmud, the Orthodox Jews, they're like 95% Republicans and conservatives.
All right, gentlemen, we got a few minutes left. General Boykin, I'm gonna turn that question on you a little bit. You're a pastor and evangelical leader. You're working at a significant, if not the most significant, evangelical organization, Family Research Council in the United States. We got our own problems in the evangelical movement. I went to Moody Bible Institute, Denver Seminary. Wheaton College was the West Point in many respects of the evangelical movement. Many of these schools, not Moody and Denver Seminary, have maintained a fundamental evangelical perspective. But many historic evangelical schools or buy into a social gospel, which
Yep.
David was speaking about, that we humans redeem. How do we fix the problems in the evangelical community?
Yeah, to begin with, and I know David is very familiar with this, but in 1958, the Communist Party USA wrote a book called The Naked Communists, and they told us how they would take over America. They told us exactly what they were going to do to take over this country. And one of the things, they targeted the families. Destruction of the family means destruction of the society, but they targeted the church. And they said they were going to change religion from revealed religion to social religion. And that's what we have today. We have social religion in the evangelical world. And we have major denominations now that are falling apart, that are coming apart at the seams because of a variety of issues, most of which have to do with the LGBT agenda, whether you ordain LGBT pastors or that type of thing. And then you've got people in major denominations that are now questioning the inerrancy of the Bible, of the word of the Bible. We as Christians believe the Bible is the inerrant word of God. But you have that being questioned. You have being questioned whether the 10 Commandments are still appropriate, still apply to the Christian church. You have this replacement theology now that says, well, the Christian church has replaced Israel. Well, all of this stuff is just taking a toll on the evangelical community. But hear me now. What you are seeing is, and I'm seeing it as now that we're back out speaking, like yesterday and Friday and Saturday, Oliver North and I were there in Tennessee. There were thousands of people at this church who were hungry to hear the word of God and to hear about what's going on in this nation from a Christian's perspective. So the roots of another great awakening are taking root right now. A great awakening, not a revival. You see, a revival is located in probably just one part of the country. We're talking about an awakening. And I believe that the status of Israel and the long-term status of the Jews is going to be part of what's bringing about what we're seeing right now, which is the embers of a great awakening, a third great awakening. Now, we've got a lot to go through before we get there, from my perspective. And we've got to be so disgusted, just like we were at the end of Jimmy Carter's administration. We've got to be so disgusted with what we see in this country that we not only vote right, but we get off our backsides and we get out and we go to the school board meetings, we run for the school board, we run for the city council, we run for the state legislatures. We do all we can do at a level where we can make a difference. We can have an impact as Christians, not only as Americans, but as Christians. And I think that what we're going to see is we're going to go through some hard times, but we're going to see people just like in Jimmy Carter's era that are going to say, I have had enough of this. The question is, how long will it take us to turn that around? And I would say to you, if we get the right person in, it's going to take a decade to get it turned around, and some of it will never be turned around.
Yeah, a great awakening. That's a great way of putting it, because we're seeing it on the ground. And this war in Israel is a flashpoint element of that great awakening. And it can be reduced to several elements, questions to the evangelical community, the inerrancy of the Bible, the role of LGBT, all of that. But it can also be reduced to, do you stand with Israel?
Yes.
Not do you agree with every decision the Israeli government makes? That's a narrow view. I'm talking about the existential question. Do you agree that Israel, the Jewish people in that little land in Asia next to Egypt, do they have a right to live and not be bombarded and killed by their Islamic neighbors? Yes or no? That's all very simple. And if you do, then when they are attacked, can they defend themselves? That is going to be a flashpoint question in this awakening. And I see millions and millions and millions of people ready to get into the street, David, peacefully and legally through the First Amendment, make their voices known. This week, we have 2 rallies here in Florida, one in Palm Beach and one in Broward County, and there will be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. So things are moving in the right direction. General Blinken, take a minute to have a closing message for our audience, and I'm going to ask you, David, the same question.
Yeah, this is what I want to say to everybody that sees this broadcast today. You're going to have to decide. You are going to have to decide whether you're going to be a player or a spectator. And if you're going to be a spectator, then just go sit in the corner and suck your thumb, because it's going to be rough out there on the playing field. And you've got to decide whether you're going to be part of the solution. And I will tell you, if we get involved at the level where we can have an impact and everybody gets involved, we can make a huge difference in the direction of this country. But we need to recognize what's going on here and don't get hung up on conspiracy theory. Know what factually is actually happening. Read David's book. Every book that he has written is full of factual information that will help you as an American citizen, you as a Christian. It will help you to understand what's happening and what has to be done.
Amen. I second that. Read David's book. You can go to Amazon, The Enemies Within, and the whole concept of a totalitarian movement within the Biden administration. David, take a minute or two. Your closing thoughts on, there's your book. That's The Dark Agenda. That one's good. Every Christian should read The Dark Agenda. You can get these on Amazon. And then The Enemies Within, about formulation of a totalitarian movement within the U.S., within the United States of America. David Horowitz, take a moment to share your closing thoughts.
We're at war. We have a fascist regime in Washington. People are asleep if they don't understand that. We have witch hunts going on in the military, among the police departments, and the Department of Homeland Security. We just had a Marine commander persecuted, whatever he was, I can't remember what they stripped him of his command or something, for objecting to anti-American propaganda being taught to our military. I look on the January 6th event as the Reichstag fire. Hitler was elected. He was elected in a democracy. The Weimar Republic was a democracy, to the chancellorship. The minute he got that, the Nazi Party burned their capital, the Reichstag, blamed it on a Dutch communist, and then passed the Reichstag fire law, which outlawed their opposition. The Democrats are doing the same thing with calling the trespassing of January 6th an armed insurrection when there wasn't a single arm confiscated, covering up the murder by a Capitol police officer of Ashley Babbitt, a 14-year Air Force veteran, unarmed. The murder was videoed, so you can see that it's just a murder. She was threatening nobody. That journalist is in jail. There are still people in jail 5 months after January 6th, held without bail, their crime trespassing, summoning 25,000 troops into the Capitol when there's no threat at a cost of $500 million. This is designed to intimidate people. Let's not forget they called for the expulsion of 100 House Republicans for questioning an election, something the Democrats have done over every Republican victory since 1980. These are fascists, and our side is calling them liberals. People, if you don't get into this battle in your schools, in your local city councils at every level, before you know it, they're going to be putting us all in re-education camps. They've already said that's what they want to do. So please, this is a very, very serious moment in our national life. And when I look at it, to me, the evangelical movement is the vanguard. It's a large movement, and if it gets fired up and is willing to defend its faith, we can win. But that's what it's really about. It's about the right. Look, why do they hate believers? They hate them because believers don't owe their allegiance to the state. They owe it to a higher power. So when the state goes wrong, as it does when it puts people like AOC and Ilhan Omar in positions of power, they have a higher set of principles and a higher person to worship than Nancy Pelosi or Joe Biden.
On that note,
That's why they're a threat. That's why Christianity is such a threat to the totalitarians. So defend your faith, but do it actively. Do what General Boykin says. Get involved.
Amen.
defend your faith. Amen, for sure. David, General Boykin, thank you very, very much. We appreciate it. We'll be back in touch with you to indeed do what we need to do to save this constitutional republic and stand with the state of Israel. Thank you, everybody. We got to go now. Tom Trento signing off for our
Thank you
team
very
here.
much.